My name is Melissa, and I am 48 years old, and I am a registered nurse and a mother and a daughter and a sister. I had a wonderful childhood, had everything that I needed. I knew that in second grade I wanted to be a nurse, and I achieved that goal pretty easily. And I also was very active in athletics and in the gym, cooking. I was an avid cook. I loved to cook for my family. I loved being a homemaker. I loved being a mother. I think as my career took off and I had more responsibility in my position, I became overwhelmed and just found myself drinking more to cope. My relationship with my spouse was not good. Things just were not good on that front, and I had no coping skills at that time. So my solution was to turn to alcohol, and I was drinking more and more. I found myself drinking at work and pretty much around the clock. My family life was chaotic. My relationship with my husband became extremely volatile. My entire family unit just began to deteriorate. My son was extremely concerned about his mother. I can remember one day my son waking me up at 7 years old and saying to me, "Mommy, do you want to die?" And I looked right at him and said yes. That is the amount of despair that I was in, and the amount of hopelessness that I had in my life at that time. I did go to some other rehabs, and nothing worked for me. I was essentially drinking against my will every single day, and absolutely powerless over my addiction. He would let himself off the bus at 7 years old and come into the house where I should have been there to get him off the bus, but I was inside on the couch, passed out. I didn't have any kind of ability to have dinner for him. I was unable to help him with his homework. Just unable to be a mother at that point. In my head at that time, I knew that I had a problem, but I just didn't see any way up and out. I didn't want anybody to know. I didn't want my extended family here in New Jersey to know what was going on, and I just couldn't stop. It was my immediate family that knew. My extended family was 800 miles away, and I was keeping it from them. I was completely isolated. I didn't want to reach out for help because I was embarrassed. I didn't want to reach out for help because I didn't want my extended family to know how bad things had gotten. And I certainly didn't want my child. I didn't want my child to lose his mother. I didn't want to go away to a rehab. I was fearful that I would lose my family. I was afraid of the shame that it would bring to my own child in school and with his friends and even in the neighborhood. You know, the situation was not worse than my son having an untreated alcoholic mother. And I wanted to be a mother to him, and I knew that I had to do something. Something had to change. When I realized I needed help, I reached out to my mother here in New Jersey, and I packed up my things, everything that I could fit into my car, and I came back here to New Jersey. I essentially left my family and came back here to get help. Once I got here to New Jersey, I continued to hide how bad things really were from her. Living in the house, I attempted to hide it. I knew I needed help, but I didn't want her to know how bad things had gotten. I didn't want her to be embarrassed. I was ashamed of how bad things had gotten. And it took a little while for me to live that way in front of her until she really realized how bad things had been and for how long, and she would have gone to any lengths to get me help. when my mother actually saw how sick that I was, I still had a lot of feelings of shame and guilt. But she just kept pushing. She just kept pushing and let me know that I was the most important thing to her and that she would have done anything to get me help. She was not ashamed of me. She did not make me feel bad about myself. Her main focus was to get me the help that I needed, and her main focus was to make sure that her daughter was going to stay alive. So my mother made a phone call, and she was directed to Recovery Centers of America, and it was in the evening time. She was told that they may not have a bed for me, but to bring me anyway, that they would find room for me there at Recovery Centers of America. And so the next morning, she drove me to Recovery Centers of America, and my mother felt very comfortable leaving me there. Everybody was very nice. Everybody reassured my mother and myself that things would be okay. I went through the admission process. It was very comfortable, very welcoming, and I know that when my mother left me there that day, that she felt like everything was going to be all right, and she finally was able to have some peace of mind. When I first got to Recovery Centers of America, going through the admissions process, everybody was very helpful and very reassured me and my mother that things would be okay. I was moved into a room, a very comfortable room, very much like a home setting. And I was cared for by the staff there, the medical staff. I was also met by recovery support staff there, who welcomed me and that told me that I was in the right place and that everything was going to be okay. I was amazed to find that in a facility, that facility in particular, in Recovery Centers of America, that I was not unique. I was sitting among other people like myself. I was among staff that had been through similar addiction. I was with staff that were living happy and purposeful lives, and that was encouraging to me. And I was among other residents whose stories may have been different than mine, but the pain was the same. And we were all in the same place for the same reason. We were there because we had an addiction. And it was just a comfort to have staff around that had been through something like I was going through at that time. And again, just finally not feeling unique, finally not feeling alone. I was in the right place. I think what stood out to me the most at Recovery Centers of America was that the number of staff members that were in recovery. It made their concern for me genuine. It made me feel like, again, I was not unique, that these people had a genuine interest in my recovery. These people had a genuine interest in me getting my life back together, beating the addiction and getting back out into the world and leading a purposeful life. There were so many staff members there that were in recovery and that freely talked about that. That made a huge difference for me. I think that the advice that they gave me and the care that they gave me would not have meant as much to me had they not been in my shoes and had walked the same path that I had just walked and was walking. I think that about halfway through being there at Recovery Centers of America, I started to understand that I needed to focus on my recovery outside of the facility, because I knew at some point I was going to get discharged. And I expressed that concern to some of the staff members. I was fearful that once I got out, I wasn't going to be able to maintain my sobriety. And I was met with nothing but understanding that they had been there too. So about halfway through my stay there, I started to focus on what it was that I was going to need to do when I was discharged from the facility. I was also told that I would not be just discharged and put out, kind of to fend for myself, that there was going to be an aftercare program, that they were going to provide transportation to me to make sure that I was able to get to that aftercare program, and they were not just going to let me go and turn me out to fend for myself. Knowing that my care was going to continue really helped me feel like I had a shot, that I could really do this thing and I could beat my addiction. The difference at Recovery Centers of America, the difference that in that facility compared to the other places that I had been to, it was a much more comfortable environment. Again, it was very much like being in a home. The places that I went into, the different rooms I went into for group therapy, they were set up like living rooms. It was just comfortable. When I had to go back to my own room in the residence, it was just like my own bedroom. I had privacy. I was respected, and the schedule was something that was attainable there. It was doable. I was not didn't feel like I was forced to do anything there. I felt like I finally had a little bit of control over what it was that I wanted to do, and how I wanted my recovery to go while I was in the facility. And for the first time, I really felt like I had some control over something in my life. But the whole time I was there, I was supported as well. And for a very long time, I didn't feel like I had a lot of support. I just felt alone. I felt isolated. And finally, I was in this environment that was very much like a loving community. And I was finally had some hope, and really felt like I was going to be able to get through it and come out on the other side. So my mother did come for the family counseling sessions. Again, we were in a comfortable room with a counselor, and she felt very comfortable being able to speak freely, as did I, and we talked about some things that we probably wouldn't have talked about in any other setting. It was very helpful to work through a lot of the things that I was afraid to tell her for so very long. It was just a comfortable environment that we were both able to open up. My mother also was invited to come on Saturdays and have lunch with me. That was extremely beneficial for her because she was able to see my progress. She was able to see me physically start to get better. She was able to see me physically not look so sick. It gave her hope that she could see me on a weekly basis and see that progression towards recovery. I think after those family counseling sessions, I felt a sense of relief that I was able to speak to her freely about all of the things that I had been hiding from her for a very, very long time. It was a very lonely existence for me, and it was exhausting trying to hide what was going on with me and my addiction from her. In those counseling sessions, I think that my mother was able to speak freely, as was I. I was able to tell her how awful things were and how I wanted to die. And I think that she was reassured. Any sense of guilt that she felt, she was reassured by the staff that it wasn't her fault, that she had given me everything in life, and addiction doesn't discriminate, that her daughter was affected just like so many other people. I think that when I got to Recovery Centers of America, I essentially had to wave the white flag. I really felt like there was no help for me. There was no hope. I had tried everything. There was no doctor. There was no medication. There was nobody in my family that loved me enough that could get me to stop drinking. And I really felt like I had to do something different. And what I hadn't done was really get down on my knees and beg God for help, and to beg in prayer for help. And I was able to do that there. I was able to do that comfortably. I was able to do that without being judged. I don't know. I really feel like I was at the end of the road, like I said, and for me, dropping down on my knees and begging God in prayer was the last stop for me. So I was given my discharge date, and it was I was notified about, I think it was 2 or 3 days prior to getting out, and everyone was in agreement that I was ready to go. But again, I was still apprehensive. I felt as though I had been locked away, that I was in a bubble, that I didn't have the opportunity to be around alcohol, and that maybe that's why I felt the confidence that the little bit of confidence that I did getting out, that I had been locked away from it for 28 days. But the discharge process, I was just over and over again told that I was not going to be let go to fend for myself, that there was going to be aftercare. I was given a meeting list. I was told where I could go. It was suggested to me, of course, to get to a meeting as soon as I got out of treatment. But it was also put in place for me that the day I was discharged from treatment, I was going to go right into an IOP situation, and I would be there for a number of weeks. That was reassuring because I was still going to be tied to Recovery Centers of America, and that I wanted to be. The day I was discharged, there was a plan in place for me the very next day to get back to Recovery Centers of America as an outpatient. My mother was very relieved that I was actually going to be taken to outpatient that same day, and very happy to know that from there they were going to actually drive me back to my doorstep. I can remember coming home. I can remember her opening the front door and just being thrilled that I was back and I was alive. And for weeks, I was still going to be cared for by the facility until I was really able to do it on my own. What I would say to my mother today is thank you. I'm full of gratitude for what she did for me. I am so thankful that she stood by me. I'm so thankful that she didn't judge me, that she was just there to support me all the way through, getting me into treatment, keeping me or taking me in after treatment, and I still reside with her today. She's just been a pillar of strength for me, and I couldn't have done it without her. To say that I never had it so good is an understatement. My life today has purpose. I'm grateful for every day that I wake up. I'm able to give back. I'm able to be a mother. I'm able to be a daughter. I'm able to be a part of all the milestones in my family's life today. The things that I've been able to accomplish in 20 months of sobriety are amazing. My son is 10 years old now, and for him to look at me and tell me that I'm beautiful, and to tell me that I'm proud, that he's proud of me, I can't even describe that. For a child to have seen what he saw and to be in my life the way that he is today is truly a miracle. I would want to say to him that, thank God that he loved me through this process. Thank God that I had something to come home to. Thank God that he was there to support me, and I can't wait for the years that we're going to have together as mother and son. Sober years, years that he's only going to get to see the best of me if I keep doing what I'm doing today. I never ever thought, first of all, that I would be addicted to alcohol or that it would almost kill me. And I certainly never thought that I would come out on the other side as successfully as I have.